Hello. So we're going to do a recording of the info sessions that we've been doing on Monday and Wednesday mornings. Hopefully this will be helpful for folks who haven't been able to get to those, or who want these videos as a means of reference when they're practicing on their own, or just as a means of being easier than a sort of public forum like we were doing with the sessions on Wednesday and Monday mornings. So here's a little bit about me. I'm Rose. Nice to meet you. I'm not a speech pathologist. I am not a career professional vocal coach, but I do have a lot of experience when it comes to affecting my voice, and I am learning from a career professional vocal coach on how to teach voice changing and voice feminization. I have 20 plus years of vocal experience, singing, acting, voice acting, vocal percussion, and then most recently, vocal feminization. And the teacher I'm learning from has been a keynote speaker at a lot of prominent university presentations. She really knows what she's talking about. She does a fantastic job, and she's been lately teaching me how to teach. So I've got some basic idea of how to get this information across. When it comes to practicing, always make sure, no matter how much or how little you're going to practice at a given time, that you always warm up. You always take the time to get yourself into a comfortable spot, and you get yourself sort of lots of room to be not straining yourself. It's important to do a warm-up regardless of how little you plan to be practicing at a time. Make sure to keep hydrated. Water is your best bet for this. Generally speaking, anything with sugar or caffeine in it is going to be something that will dry out your voice. Anything that's carbonated is going to be irritating to all of the pieces of the vocal tract at once. So those are options that you'll want to stick away from if you don't want to just go with water. If you feel any pain, strain, or tension, make sure to take some rest. Make sure to stop. Generally speaking, I suggest that if you're brand new to this and you don't sort of know the threshold for your voice just yet, that as soon as you start feeling any of these things, you stop for the day and pick it up again the following day. And finally, there are lots of exercises out there that suggest that you use catching a swallow as the means of determining where your larynx should be, or feeling your larynx moving around. Highly recommend against this. It can be dangerous in the worst case and could cause choking, and even if it doesn't, it can cause a lot of strain on your vocal folds and your vocal tract generally. So if you're going to do any kind of body processes like yawning, swallowing, make sure to stop, take a break, let that happen. Once it's finished, keep going back to your back to your vocal practice. Finally, the sort of general way that I teach tends to be first learning the sort of absolute most of whatever it is that we're working on, whatever particular aspect of the voice we're working on, and then dialing it back once we sort of get used to that. So this video will just go over the sort of the top end of whatever it is we're learning. So it'll feel a little bit extra, a little bit over the top to start with. But once you get the hang of it, you can start to sort of experiment with it, start to sort of move it around, play with it a little bit, and see if you can find something that's right for you. So what is resonance? Resonance is the quality that gets added to the voice by the amount of space in our vocal tract when we produce our voice. So think of the difference between a guitar and a ukulele. If they both play the same note, you're still able to tell which one is which because the ukulele has a smaller resonating space, and as a result, it produces a brighter sound. They'll both be playing the same note, so the pitch is the same, but it's a different sound. You can tell which is which. You can tell that the ukulele is smaller just by the nature of the sound that it's producing. That's what we're trying to do with our vocal tract. We're trying to make it smaller so that we get that brighter sound going. We want to be ukuleles. We don't want to be guitars necessarily. And how do we do that? I'll get to that later. Never mind. Most importantly, resonance isn't just pitch. So you can change your pitch without changing your resonance. You can change your resonance without changing your pitch. Those two things are totally independent of each other. Pitch is a matter of how quickly your vocal folds are vibrating and the length of them you're allowing to vibrate at a time. Resonance is how much space is available in your vocal tract as you produce your voice and how that affects the way that your voice sounds. So la 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 la. That's on the same resonance, but it was on multiple different pitches. La 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 la. That's all different resonances, but all the same pitch. So don't get these two things confused. If you're moving your pitch up, that doesn't necessarily mean you're adjusting your resonance. That said, those two things do typically want to go a little bit hand in hand. You want to make sure that your pitch and your resonance are compatible with each other. You want to make sure that they're the two, that they're sort of working together, as opposed to sort of sounding like they're not quite the way that they should be, or they're not quite the right combination for you. So experiment around, see what you think, but make sure that you know that resonance and pitch are not the same thing. They're functionally different pieces of your voice, and they're produced in different ways. How do we affect resonance? So we're going to be changing the position of various pieces of our vocal tract to make the space smaller, and by extension, we make the sound brighter. We're going to be doing that by engaging some muscles that are typically a little bit tricky, so we've got some exercises for that later. But just sort of at the surface level, what we're going to be doing is trying to raise the root of our tongue, raise our larynx, engage the arch of soft tissue sort of at the back of your mouth right before it sort of descends into your throat, and the position of our mouths. All these things contribute to resonance because they're different pieces of the vocal tract where there is space that we can either make larger or smaller. So in all of those cases, we're going to do what we can to make them smaller spaces. We want to make sure we do this in a way that isn't going to sort of constrict anything or block anything or cause any problems. This can especially come up when it comes to raising the root of the tongue. But by and large, it's something that we can sort of work towards having in an unobstructed way all the way through. So what do we need to be careful of? Vocal strain will always be on this list. Anytime we're doing anything to do with vocal feminization, we need to be careful that we're not straining our voice. So again, talking about like we were before, if you feel any pain, strain, or tension, you want to make sure you take a break for the day. Especially if you're brand new, you want to make sure that you take a break for the rest of the day. Start practice again the next day. If you get to the point where you're sort of really comfortable with how much vocal stamina you have, especially if you've got some previous experience, you can, if you want to, have multiple sessions in a day, as long as you feel that that vocal strain has sort of eased off and you're back in a comfortable spot again. We also want to be careful of anything where we feel a sort of natural body process happening, especially yawning or swallowing. If you feel a yawn coming on, or if you feel like you need to swallow, stop. Even in the middle of whatever exercise you want to, or whatever exercise you're doing, and just let yourself do whatever it is you need to do. Yawn, finish the yawn, then carry on with your exercise. Swallow, finish the swallow, then finish up the rest of your exercise. You want to make sure you let your body do what it needs to do because it's doing it for a reason. We also want to make sure we don't get too far into our nose or cheeks. So a lot of people, as they're learning how to adjust their resonance, will find themselves in a spot where they can find an easy win by putting their voice up into their nose like this. This feels like it creates an extra sort of amount of resonance. It feels like it might help you towards that goal that you're aiming for. But it causes a lot of issues when it comes to changing our voice with the other pieces and having that work together, having resonance work together with those other pieces as well. Pitch, vocal weight, all sorts of other stuff that we can affect for how our voice sounds. So we want to make sure that we don't go into our nose and cheeks unless that's very specifically something that you want to do. As with anything when it comes to voice practice, as it comes to sort of building your own voice, finding your own voice, anything you want is correct. Anything that is good for you, anything that sounds right to you, anything that makes it your voice is totally fine as long as it's healthy, as long as it's something that's not hurting or straining your voice. If it's something you're doing unintentionally, or if it's something that you haven't yet figured out how to remove from your voice, that's going to be something that you want to make sure that you're aiming to sort of find exercises for, find techniques for, practice and experiment to remove from your voice if it's something that you're doing intentionally. We also want to be careful of the correct, I'm doing air quotes, but you can't see me, correct voice versus the voice that we want. Like I was just talking about, anything that you choose that is like uniquely your voice, makes it your voice, is the thing that you want for your voice, is totally fine. There is no correct femme voice. So anything you want is acceptable as long as, or like acceptable, even better, it's, encouraged. As long as it's not causing you any pain or strain. So don't get too in your own head about, I need to do a thin vocal weight, a high pitch, and the brightest resonance I possibly can. Lots of people have lots of different kinds of voices. So don't feel like you're, doing anything wrong. As long as you're aiming for what's right for you, you're doing it correctly. And finally, when it comes to referencing with the Eve's apple, so a few of the exercises I'll go into in a minute here will reference putting your fingers on your Eve's apple. That's that little bump in the front of your throat, also sometimes called the Adam's apple, whatever works for you. And what you're going to do is place your fingers so gently on that Eve's apple to feel your larynx moving around. It's sort of attached, it's sort of an external reference for where your larynx is and how it's being positioned. So it's a good way to get some physical reference for what's going on. But you want to be very, very careful that you don't apply any pressure. You just put your fingers super gently there, just enough to feel it moving around, basically just touching the skin as opposed to actually applying any pressure there. So make sure you're very, very gentle when it comes to pressing anywhere on your throat, really. Let's go through some exercises. So the warm-up that we have that targets resonance is big dog, small dog. What we're going to do here is start by imagining a very large dog when it's tired or when it's hot, and specifically when it's panting. So we're going to imagine that really big dog panting, and we're going to try and imitate that sound ourselves. It's sort of big, H-O-H sound. Big sort of mouth space, lots of air coming through. We're going to do a few more of those, just for reference. And then we're going to try and do the same thing, but this time imitating a very small dog panting. This is more of an H-A-H or an H-E-H sound. Once we get the hang of both, we're going to go 4 of one, then 4 of the other. 4 of one, then 4 of the other. Back and forth as many times as you feel like you need to. Doesn't have to be 4, but I do recommend doing them evenly. So you could do 3 of one, 3 of the other, 5 of one, 5 of the other, 12 of one, 12 of the other, whatever works for you. 4 is usually a good round number for this, but again, whatever works for you. So we're just going to do them back and forth. And as we do this, what we're going to do is place our fingers super gently on the Eve's apple. We're going to feel it moving around in most cases. As you go from this one to this one, you should feel it slide up your throat a little bit. This is not the case for everybody. There are some folks who have either very soft Eve's apples, so they don't move around all that much, or it's hard to feel that movement. There are also some folks who have them very recessed, so they're further into their throat, or not as prominent, which means that you won't necessarily be able to feel that sort of point of reference. And finally, there are some people who just have a very high or a very sort of raised larynx position to begin with. Those people probably won't feel a whole lot of difference between the two here. So be not afraid if you don't feel it right away. Give it lots of practice, give it lots of experimentation, sort of mess around with it, see if there's a way that you can do it that does get that movement going on. But it's not the end of the world if it's not something that works for you. Now, onto our full exercises. So what we're going to do for our first exercise here is called whisper sirens. We're going to start on the vowel oo, but we're going to start whispering, and we're going to start it at the very bottom of our vocal range. So, from there, we're going to slide up to the top of our vocal range and change to an ah vowel. And this can include your falsetto range for now. These exercises don't really mind whether or not you're using your falsetto, but you don't want to use your falsetto for your day-to-day voice. It can sound unnatural. So altogether, this exercise sounds like this. And as you get more used to this exercise, as you sort of practiced at it, you can also add a ya to the end of that sort of ah vowel. You want to make sure you hang on to that ah for a minute, just so that you get used to it and you get yourself nice and stable at that top resonance. But once you've gotten to that top resonance, you can change to a voiced ya to see if you can apply it to that sort of voiced sound. So, yeah, 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 yeah. You can hear that's got even quite a bit more bright a resonance than my usual sort of speaking voice does. So lots of practice with this. This is maybe one of the best exercises when it comes to getting used to moving your resonance around and figuring out how to get those muscles engaged, figure out what you need to use to make your voice a higher resonant sound. You'll also be able to do the same thing we were doing with Big Dog, Small Dog with this exercise. So you can place your finger very gently on your Eve's apple again, and you should be able to feel as you slide up to that upper ah sound, you should be able to feel that Eve's apple sliding up. Again, not if you're any of the exception cases I mentioned at the end there, but as you do this exercise, you should feel that larynx moving. So next up, we have vowel shifting. We're going to use the vowels oo, ah, and ah here. And what we're going to do with those vowels is start them off whispered. So, ooh, oh, ah. Start them off, generally speaking, I prefer personally to use a sort of tone that's medium to high for me. So stable, comfortable, but still in my higher register, just so I get more practice with using those higher pitches if I want it. And what we're going to do here is just change those vowels from that whispered sound to that voiced pitched sound. Pardon me. So it's going to sound like this. Ooh, ah, ah, ah. And remember, what we're aiming for here is just keeping our vocal tract in the same position that we did for whisper sirens at the top end there. So we're just aiming for that really nice, bright resonant space, keeping that larynx raised as we sort of produce the voiced sound for these vowels. It's basically the same sort of thing as we're going for when we do the yeah on the end of the whisper sirens. So one more time. Ooh. Ah, ah, ah. Excuse me. You can hear as I'm going here. Things don't always sound perfect. Don't worry about it if that's the case. As you're doing your exercises, you will find that on some days, sometimes they just come out sounding a little funky. Sometimes, something funny will happen or something will change in your voice as you go. As AMAB folks, especially, are prone to. Voice cracks are a thing that happen as you practice your voice. So don't be worried about it if that kind of thing happens. That doesn't mean that your voice is bad or anything like that. Just take some practice to get that stability, get used to what you're changing, what you're working with. It's just like when your voice was changing the first time. Our third exercise here is going to be specifically focused on the palatopharyngeal arch, which sounds very complicated, but it's just the arch of soft tissue, back just in front of your uvula at the back of your mouth. And what we're going to do here is the same as we did for the whisper sirens, but this time we're going to use different sounds, and we're going to do them in a more of a stepwise manner as opposed to just sliding like we did for the whisper sirens. So what we're going to do here is start on that same sort of low whispering sound, so the like that, but this time we're going to do it with the g or k sound. Generally speaking, we want to include as little of the I vowel here as possible. Pardon me, I need a little bit of water. We want as little of the vowel as possible and as much of the consonant as we can get. So altogether, this exercise is going to sound like this. So you can hear I'm basically not adding the I in there at all where I can help it. And we're just going to slide that sound up, trying to make it sort of stepwise as opposed to sliding. We can do the same thing with the K sound, this K consonant. Some people actually find this one a fair bit easier than the G, so you may want to start with this one instead. And you can hear that sort of difference as we slide up. As you do this exercise, if you want to, you can also do it with your mouth as open as possible, looking into a mirror or looking into your phone's camera. It can show you, if your tongue isn't in the way, the arch of the back of your mouth, and it'll be sort of contracting and engaging as you make the k or k sounds. That's the part of the mouth that we use to engage these, and we can use them as a means of sort of getting used to what that muscle is and what the collection of muscles we're going to use to adjust that is. Once you get used to it, if you can make a point of just engaging those muscles all the time when you're speaking. And that'll add a little bit to the brightness of your resonance as you speak, because it not constricts, but it reduces the amount of space that's present in your mouth. Which is a handy way to brighten up your resonance without relying exclusively on your larynx. And the last piece we're going to do here is just focusing on nasality. So again, like we were talking about before, if nasal sounds are something that you really want for your voice, more power to you. That's absolutely something you can have as part of your voice, as long as it's something you really want. But if it's something you're doing unintentionally, it's something we want to remove, because it can affect how effective the rest of our tuning, the rest of our exercises are at affecting and changing our voice to what we want it to sound like. So to make sure that we're not being too nasal, what we're going to do is just the same thing we were doing with the whisper sirens. We're going to go through a regular whisper siren exercise. We're going to get to that yeah sound. We're going to say yeah over and over again with that higher resonance. And we're going to plug and unplug our nose as we do so. That'll give us a sense of whether or not a lot of the sound is coming out through the nose, especially in situations where it doesn't need to be. The word yeah doesn't have any nasal sounds in it whatsoever. So if we're putting any sound through our nose, that's sort of coming through a neutral word, and means that nasality is happening even when we don't want it to be. Plenty of words do have nasal sounds in them, so no worries at all if there's a nasal sound happening when they're supposed to be. And especially if you're, trying to check your nasality with a word that has a nasal sound in it, it's going to sound nasal. That's part of the word. But for words that are neutral, like yeah, we shouldn't hear it change if we do this following exercise, which is just saying the word yeah over and over again with that bright resonance, plugging and unplugging our nose. So yeah, 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 yeah. So I plugged and unplugged my nose on each of those yeahs. Very little, if any, difference between them. If I was too far up into my nose, it would sound more like this. Yeah, 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 yeah. You can hear that sort of nasal blocked sound. You can hear it sort of muted, it's sort of plugged. And that's not because we're using a nasal sound. For example, nose, nose, nose. If I say the word nose, I'm always going to have that nasal sound because N is a nasal sound. But the word yeah doesn't have any of those, so it should always be the same. Yeah, 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 yeah. Instead of yeah, 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 yeah. We want that consistent, similar sound from one to the next. That's it for this vocal session. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer whatever I can in the Vocal Feminization chat or the VT General chat. There are sessions for usual sort of warm-up and practice on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, except Fridays, which is 9 a.m. Pacific time. There's also an alternate time session on Tuesdays at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, if that works better for you. And of course, Mondays and Wednesdays, we have these info sessions, which I will be slowly recording, so hopefully this was helpful for you. as you go, as just sort of some notes at the end here, as you go, as you practice, as you get used to working with your voice, I highly encourage that once you get to the end of your exercises for the day, you spend some time practicing just experimenting with your voice, just trying different things, exploring what you can and can't do with your voice. Maybe sort of trying to do, impersonations of people, trying to sing a little bit, trying to script read, trying to read a passage out of a book, or just taking some of the pieces that you've learned as you've done vocal feminization and just see how you can change them or how you can apply them together in a interesting new way. A lot of the pieces of my voice that I use day to day currently are things that I found through experimentation or refined through experimentation. So I highly recommend that once you get used to it enough, once you have a bit more control over what your voice sounds like and how you can change it, you start to play around with it and try different things. You may find something that you weren't looking for in the first place. That's it for this session. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you've got any feedback about the videos, please let me know. I'll happily change either this one or the way that I present videos in the future, and hopefully this helps the folks who weren't able to get to the sessions. You're all doing great. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon. Bye.